He stands at the curb of a quiet block where porch bulbs do more work than streetlights. Somewhere a mailbox clacks. Somewhere a dog forgets why it barked. Two notes drift in like a pulse from behind a door. He looks at a face that isn't a face, cheap latex turned into a question by the angle of a lamp, and at the ordinary walk that carried it through 40 Halloweens. The houses haven't moved, the years have. Some nights the timeline runs straight, some nights it forks, but the footsteps never change. He counts the distance from hedge to porch, from porch to latch, and lets the room finish the math. The story will start in 1978. It will end where the light is still on. Hey, I'm glad you made it. Before we start, we do 3 soft checks, our little ritual. 1, breathe in, slow, like you're fogging a window. 2, loosen your jaw. 3, thumb on the table, click the quiet key. Good. This is sleepy history horror. We don't scream here, we listen. I tell true stories like a late-night walk with a friend who notices the small stuff. Clocks, doors, ledgers, radio cards, the gentle proof that says what happened and when. Sometimes 2 honest things disagree, and that gap is our kind of horror. It's not jumpy, it's human. Around here, we keep house rules simple. Stay kind in the comments, stay curious with the details, and keep the volume low. If something feels heavy, we slow down. If a number won't add up, we check it together. When it finally makes sense, or refuses to, we let the paper have the last word. If you want a quiet corner online, make it this one. Hit subscribe, tell me what place we should walk next, and bring your own quiet key. Maybe it's a pen, a coin, or nothing at all. I'll start the clock, you make yourself comfortable, and we'll let the room speak first. Ready? Breathe, loosen, click. Let's begin. He stands on an ordinary sidewalk where the porches repeat. A dog barks once, then loses interest. Leaves slide along the curb like cards being shuffled. He thinks about how most fear is timing, not teeth. He wants a shape that is only a person, and a person who feels like weather. He writes a note on a scrap. Stillness first, footsteps second. He circles the word suburbia and underlines plain. She sits at a small table with a yellow pencil and keeps the voices small. A sitter talks about school. A friend jokes with a smile that means one thing at noon and another thing at night. The story needs no speeches. It needs hallway lights spilling across a carpet and the easy sound of a house resting. She writes, then crosses out, then lets the line breathe. The fear will live in the spaces. He listens to a metronome and sets it a little too fast. The 2-note figure is simple, almost a drill, almost a chant. He plays it again, slower, then faster, then finds the beat that makes waiting feel like a decision. He thinks of streets that look the same in every town. He wants the sound to be honest about time. He wants the listener to notice their own pulse, then wonder why. They talk about the mask as if it were a wall. A face that shows nothing makes every guess wrong. If the eyes are blank, the viewer will fill them. He thinks of store shelves and a latex pull that was not meant for this job. She says the mask should catch porch light but not tell a story by itself. The less it speaks, the more the room will. He wants the camera low, at shoulder height, as if a person is there, not a trick. The lens will hold on a doorway longer than feels polite. It will linger on pumpkins the way a person would drift past them, not like a machine hunting for a scare. He draws a small map, street, house, window, hedge. He marks the hedge twice. Something about a hedge makes people look again. They agree the name should be ordinary. Laurie sounds like a friend from down the block. Michael is just a boy in a yearbook. No one has special words or heavy monologues. If the world is plain, the odd thing will carry more weight. They choose a small town that only exists when you say it softly. They let the town carry the code for every town that came with a school bell and a hardware store. He remembers October as a color more than a date. Dried leaves, cheap decorations, porches, where adults talk half in the doorway, half into the night. He wants the threat to feel like bad weather that never announces itself. The house should not be haunted. It should be clean, swept, with a bowl near the door and a jacket folded over a chair. Normal makes the turn work. She writes a note. Don't explain him. If there is a file, leave it closed. If there is a reason, let it sit off camera. She wants the story to permit guesses but not reward them. When people ask why, the film will only offer because. The shape is a mirror for the street. It is a quiet form that makes walking home feel longer. She underlines, no speech about evil. They borrow favors and time. A friend knows a place with trees that can pass for Illinois if you don't look too closely at the leaves. They move potted plants to fake a season. They tape up a few paper cutouts and are careful not to show them twice. The budget is thin, but the plan is solid. A small crew learns the map and promises to move gently. He tests the timing of a doorway, count 3 and then show nothing, count 5 and show a shoulder, count 7 and show the empty frame again. He notes how the mind builds a figure even when the screen does not. He turns the metronome down and listens to a room after the music stops. The room tells the truth. Silence, air, a soft electric hum. That is where the fear lives. Before the first frame is shot, they take one last look at the idea. A babysitter, a doctor who warns, a shape that returns, and a town that does not believe until it does. He says the film should feel like a bedtime story told by someone who doesn't blink. She says the characters should breathe like real people at the end of a long day. The plan is simple. Simple is hard. They are ready. He opens a box and sets the mask on a plain table. Under room light it looks cheap, almost silly. Under hallway light it becomes a surface for worry. He notes the way shadows fall across the cheeks and how the eye holes make the head feel empty, even when it moves. He tests it against a porch bulb and then against a living room lamp, nodding when it says nothing back. She studies how the mask erases a face without turning it into a monster. A monster would be too easy. She wants a person to fill that space, a person who keeps walking when the room asks him to stop. The mask makes him harder to read, but not harder to imagine. Every viewer will paint their own fear on it. She lets the mask sit in the script like a period at the end of a line. He holds the knife the way a cook might. Not grand, not displayed, just carried. He learns the weight, so the motion looks normal. He decides the camera won't linger on it more than it would linger on a cup or a set of keys. The power won't be in the blade. It will be in the slow, steady path from one room to the next. The walk will do the talking. The walk has a rhythm with no rush. He plants his foot, then lets the body follow the foot. No tilt of the head unless there is something to see. No flare, no bounce, just a straight line through air. He figures out how much space to leave between steps so that the listener hears their own house in it. Hallway boards, baseboard heat, a vent that clicks on at the same time each night. He records the piano figure with a click track that almost scolds the hands. The left hand sets the floor. The right hand taps a light that never quite warms the room. When he adds a small high note, it feels like a window is open somewhere. The music is not there to frighten, it is there to count. It says, this is the distance between breath and door. She builds the town from objects that do not try too hard. A broom leaning in a corner, a plastic pumpkin, a little faded from last year, a denim jacket on a chair arm. She wants the houses to look like the place where a person would leave their coffee while they tie a shoe. The more the objects feel borrowed from real homes, the more the shape will look like it has no right to share them. He plans how the camera should see through windows without feeling like a spy device. The trick is to move at a human pace and keep the frame at human height. The viewer will sense the distance and fill it with their own caution. He promises not to cut too fast. If the film respects a person's patience, it earns their fear. He writes that down and draws a small eye next to the line. They choose names that could be written on a school notebook: Laurie, Annie, Linda. Loomis sounds odd but firm, like a teacher a student would not argue with. Michael is not a villain's name. It is a neighbor's name. It matters that the names don't announce anything heavy. If a story wants to feel real, it should not dress its people in words that blink like signs. He sets a rule, no explanation, that turns the shape into homework. If there is a past, it will not cure the present. The present will be a night that does not care what came before. He is not being cruel. He is being respectful of the unknown. Many things in life stand next to us with no neat label. He wants the film to let that truth stand. She tests small bits of dialogue out loud. Friends tease. A sitter worries about a math test. A boy tells a joke and explains it just a second too long. These small notes make the house feel lived in. When the quiet comes, it will not feel like a human failed. It will feel like the night did what nights do when no one is watching: move forward, one breath at a time. Finally, they set the first night on the calendar. The crew knows the plan, the actors know the pace, and the town knows it is about to be borrowed. He takes one more look at the mask. She straightens a lampshade. The song waits on a tape that clicks as it rewinds to the start. They are building a simple room and leaving the door unlocked. That is the whole idea. He stands on a sidewalk that looks like 100 sidewalks. Porch lights blink on in a lazy line. A bicycle rests on grass. A bedroom window holds a dim square in the dark. The camera waits. It does not jump. The mask enters the frame as if it has always belonged. Somewhere, a radio plays a song about nothing in particular. He lets the notes peel away and keeps only the pulse. She watches a babysitter fold a blanket and tuck it on a couch. A call comes from a friend. It's the kind of chat that lives in the small end of memory. The words mean less than the rhythm of friendship. The night moves forward without asking permission. She pays attention to the way the sitter looks at the window when she is not sure why she looked. That look is the story in plain clothes. He threads the score so lightly the room might not notice until it stops. The two-note figure steps out, then back. Air fills the space between. He touches a low tone under a wide shot of a street. It is almost nothing, but it lifts the hair on a person's arm the way a change in weather might. He lets it fall away. The silence is honest. The silence does the work. Neighbors are not enemies. They are people closing garage doors and throwing away junk mail. The film watches them without malice. It trusts the street to be an ordinary place because it knows fear takes root best in ordinary places. A curtain moves without a clear reason. A bush stays still when it looks like it should move. The camera promises to stay as long as it takes to feel familiar. He shows the doctor as a man who believes his own eyes and hates that he does. He speaks in short lines and saves breath. The doctor's words are not spells. They are warnings that sound like weather reports. He is not a hero in a cape. He is the neighbor who says, "Lock your doors," and points at the bolts. He looks tired because this kind of watching makes everyone tired. Laurie moves through her day the way careful people do, with lists, a bag, and the habit of looking after others before herself. She laughs when she can. She does not invite danger. She minds her business. This matters. She is not a magnet for trouble. She is a person in a town. When the camera cares about her comfort, the viewer will feel it leave, and the leaving will be the bruise you notice later. The night pulls a little tighter, like a belt 1 notch smaller. Windows show less. Hallways feel longer. The mask appears, then vanishes. The film places patience next to dread and waits for them to shake hands. A pumpkin glows as if it knows about the metronome in the score. He keeps shots wide, then narrows them with the slow push of a person stepping forward. Distance is the trick. She makes the phone lines feel like veins. One call fails, another half connects, and a voice breaks. Sometimes the scariest sound is nothing when you expect a human. The house becomes a map of small choices. This door, not that one. This stair, not that light. The viewer lays their own house over the top and feels a familiar knob in their palm. It turns the exact same way. He does not let the camera gloat when it knows more than the person on the screen. The film stays kind even when it refuses to help. He sets the pace so the viewer can feel their breath slow or speed up without shame. The point is not punishment. The point is attention. Night asks us to pay attention. He makes the film answer that request with a steady hand. When the night breaks, it does not do so with fireworks. It loses its balance like a person who stands up too fast. The sound turns hollow for a moment, as if the room is larger than it was a second before. He does not decorate the moment. He lets it be. The camera holds on a face breathing air that suddenly feels thin. Ordinary houses can feel like this sometimes. It is a hard truth. By dawn, the town looks the same as before. A trash can is still tipped. A swing still moves a little. A street sign still hums in the breeze. The doctor looks like a man who will never sleep well again. Laurie looks like a person who learned a new word she did not want to know. The mask is not a memory. It is a shape that the street will keep in the corner of its eye for a very long time. He sits in a theatre where the carpet is sticky and the air smells like butter. The crowd is small on a weekday, then bigger on the weekend. Word moves faster than trailers. People tell people it felt like their own block. Some say it was mean. Some say it was clean. He listens to the exit chatter, not many jokes, just that quiet tone people use when they recognize a tool that works. Video stores will multiply like streetlights, but not yet. For now, midnight screenings carry the story city to city. He notices how different crowds react to silence. Some fill it with nervous laughter. Some let it sit like a blanket. The film does not change, the room does. He writes down a truth every creator learns late. The audience is part of the edit, even after you lock the cut. She sees copycats rise like mushrooms after rain. More masks, more knives, more heavy breathing where words could be. The lesson many take is the wrong one. They add noise where this film subtracted it. She is not angry, she is puzzled in a tender way. It is hard to learn that restraint wins. It is harder to keep it. She keeps a small notebook with one line on the first page. Do less. The poster becomes a kind of window for kids who are too young to buy a ticket. They stand in theatre lobbies and stare at a pumpkin that isn't quite a pumpkin and a hand that speaks without moving. Years later, they will say, this was the moment they decided to look at the world through a lens. Fear is not the point. Attention is. A careful frame makes space for the eye to stay. He watches a critic try to file the movie into a box that has the wrong label. Critics must name things. It is their job. They argue whether it is art or trick, whether the blank face is lazy or clever. He does not answer. The film itself answers in the way people start to check porch lights before they sit down. The measure of a story is the habit it leaves behind. Halloween becomes a word that means a season, not a day, at least in rooms like this. October lengthens. People light candles and put bowls near doors because they like to be part of a shared script. He smiles at how gentle the ritual is. A knock, a joke, a small gift. The film does not make people worse. It simply puts a small weight on the edge of the night and asks the hand to steady it. She sees the babysitter character step out of the screen and into conversation. People speak with more respect about the person who stays calm when others don't. They notice how much quiet work caretakers do. She did not plan this part of the echo, but she likes it. Sometimes telling a story with care changes how people look at the careful. He sees the doctor character return in real life as a certain kind of neighbor, the one who watches weather reports, checks batteries, asks if you changed the smoke alarm. Some laugh at him, some thank him under their breath when the lights go out. A story can turn a scold into a guide if it shows why the scold cares. The film gave him that. On quiet nights, he walks past houses and hears the theme from a living room. It is lower than he remembers, as if the room has tuned it to the size of the couch. The sound does not brag. It keeps time for a small gathering. He thinks that might be the best possible fate for a piece of music. To be a clock hand for evenings that want help staying slow. She notes how kids play monster in the yard without fangs or claws. One walks steady. One hides behind the hedge and counts. One laughs to break the spell, then asks to do it again. The game is not about winning. It is about learning how long you can stand in a doorway without talking. Childhood often practices for adult nights without telling anyone it is doing it. Years pass, and the film stays. Some copies fade, some get a new case. New towns borrow Haddonfield and find their own corners, where the street feels a little too long and the air feels a little too thin. The story is not a museum piece. It is a porch light you can flip on when you want to look at ordinary fear through clean glass. He is grateful for that. He returns to the same night as if the clock had only blinked. The town feels winded, but not finished. Ambulance doors clap and a hospital hum takes over where the house hum left off. Fluorescent light flattens the world. The camera learns new hallways that do not have curtains or pumpkins. The song lowers its voice and listens for the soft whir of machines that never sleep. She follows Laurie into corridors where shoes squeak in a way that makes people wince. Nurses move with tired grace. Security doors pretend to be firm while anyone with a key can pass. The film keeps its patience. It respects the tired. It knows that late night in a hospital tastes like metal and paper. It lets that truth sit where a speech might go in a different story. He brings the doctor back as a man who cannot set the night down even when the town wants him to. He speaks in short warnings again. He can be wrong, and he can be loud, but he is always looking at the right door. He is a kind of conscience the story needs, not because he is perfect, but because he will stay on his feet till someone else can sit down. The mask in a hospital looks more wrong than it did on a street. A hallway was built to help. It becomes a narrow river you cannot cross if the current moves against you. He uses sound to show how many things make noise when no one can help them. Ice machines, vents, wheels. The shape becomes another machine in that choir. It moves at the same tempo and so it hides. She knows the connection they add will change how people talk about the first film. A single word like sister can tilt the floor under years of careful ambiguity. She watches the choice land and listens for the room's breath. Some people like to name threads. Some like to leave them loose. The film chooses a knot. The series will live with it and then argue with it for decades. He keeps the violence off the page as much as he can. He shows the after of a room, the small mess, the doorway that swings half shut. He lets the viewer fill in more than is shown. Fear is a math problem with no numbers, only signs. He believes the signs are enough. The hospital does the rest. Everyone has walked a long corridor under lights that make skin the color of paper. Outside, the town goes on with its business. That might be the strangest part. Radios speak, phones ring, a grocery stock shelves. The film lets that ordinary run like a current under the night. Real fear often happens in a corner, while the rest of the room keeps its schedule. He doesn't blame the room, he simply notes the way it sounds when one person is measuring minutes differently than everyone else. She pays attention to doors that close softly. Most doors do. The loud ones get the press. The soft ones move more lives. A door that latches without anyone noticing is the kind that stories remember when they want to be honest. She files that detail away. She will use it again. Horror lives in the hinge more often than in the hammer. He respects the staff who were never written to be heroes, but end up holding a hallway together. A nurse who has already worked too long takes a breath and keeps going. A guard who looks like he wants to be anywhere else still checks a lock twice. He sets the camera to treat them like people with homes, not like pieces of a puzzle. That makes the place feel true. When the night finally exhales, it does not feel like a victory so much as a stop. There is a difference. People make it to morning because mornings are stubborn. The camera steps outside and lets the parking lot be a parking lot again. A soda machine clicks. A truck shifts in its sleep. The mask is not gone. It is only elsewhere. Elsewhere is the point. He watches the credits and thinks about how the same night can hold two stories without cracking. He knows they have changed the map. He is not sure yet whether the change is a line or a loop. The audience will tell him. People always do, not with essays, but with the way they carry the hallway home. He nods once, as if someone said his name across the room. He sees the film shrink to fit a living room. Edges soften. Music dips when the station wants it to. New scenes arrive to pad the slot that the network needs to fill. He is not offended. He is curious about what the story becomes when it has to share space with a lamp, a cat, and a bowl on a coffee table. Sometimes small makes a thing closer, not weaker. She watches kids meet the shape through a TV that sits on a dresser. The glow spills across homework sheets. Someone peeks through a door and says it's too late, then stays to watch anyway. The story adjusts to the furniture. It becomes a house guest with quiet habits. It does not bang pots. It waits for the next commercial to breathe. It finds a new pace and learns how to keep its pulse. He thinks about the word edited and how it sounds like tended. A network cut feels like a careful parent asking a story to keep to the sidewalk. The story, to its credit, nods and stays near the curb. The fear moves to other places, the gaps, the breathing, the way the house on the screen looks like the house across the hall. He finds that honest. Many things are scarier when named less. They see playground lore grow on the edges of the broadcast like ivy. A friend swears there is a hidden shot that no one else saw. Someone's cousin says the mask blinks in one frame if you pause it right. These tiny myths help the story live in places where movies can't always go, like bus rides and lunch lines. The film shares a desk with math and refuses to move. He notices how commercials can make fear stranger. A cereal ad pops up after a hallway goes quiet. The mind has to switch gears, then switch back. That switching has its own energy. It makes the next quiet land harder. He doesn't plan it, but he notes it. Rhythm is everywhere, in music, in cuts, and in the way a station manager measures a night between weather and the news at 10. She hears parents argue about whether kids should watch. The parents watched when they were young. They turned out fine, or they turned out different, or they turned out cautious. She understands both sides. Stories do shape us. This one does it with patience instead of punishment. If a child learns anything, it might be how to listen to a room the way a careful person does. He looks at a shelf in a video store and sees a row of boxes that turn October into a clubhouse. The artwork is louder than the movie inside. That is how shelves work. He doesn't mind. The box sells the idea. The tape holds the slower truth. People take it home and let it play while they fold laundry. Fear and chores do share space. That is another honest thing. She remembers how the film became a thing friends dared each other to sit through without speaking. It was a test of stillness, not of courage. Sit, breathe, watch the window, report what you saw. The game had a rule: you couldn't say nothing. There is always something. A curtain moved, a light flickered, a step squeaked. The movie taught a small bit of noticing that stayed useful. He sees a late-night host make jokes about the mask and relax. He knows jokes are a pressure valve. They keep the city from steaming. The film can take it. The joke fades. The porch light stays. People still turn their heads a beat early on an empty sidewalk. The story holds that beat for them. If it gives the crowd a way to speak about fear without showing their throat, that's service work. They hear that schools and churches argue the film in newsletters. Some warn. Some use it as a reason to talk about locks and neighbors and what to do when a night feels wrong. Stories become tools where you least expect it. A cautionary tale that does not scold can be a surprisingly good teacher. It hands the listener a mirror, not a lecture. He looks at the calendar and knows the next October will bring new attempts with the same mask and different hands. He hopes those hands remember the lesson that made the first night's work. Walk, don't run. Point, don't shout. Keep the camera where a person's eyes would be. Trust that quiet is not the absence of action. Quiet is the action. With that, he turns off the TV and listens to the room catching its breath. He sets the mask aside and reaches for a different October. The town is not Haddonfield. The threat wears daylight like a costume and sells it through televisions. He likes the risk. A holiday can be many stories, he says, the way a porch can hold many pumpkins. He walks forward knowing some will ask for the old path. He keeps walking anyway. New rooms need the same patience. She traces a factory line with a pencil and notes how fear can live in a jingle. A song that repeats can shape a night if enough ears hum along. She writes about masks that promise fun and carry a second purpose. She keeps the camera ordinary: parking lots, desks, motel rooms with thin walls. She lets the strange ride in the passenger seat while the radio fills the air. He treats screens like doorways that swing both directions. The commercial plays, kids chant, adults tune it out while making dinner. The film notices how modern life is full of messages no one thinks they invited. He doesn't shake a finger. He sets the volume to real life and leaves the caption in the margin. We let many songs in without noticing the door. She knows the absence. No shape in a coverall. No slow walk past a hedge. She sits with that and decides the tone will keep the center steady. Dread can survive without an icon if the cuts are honest and the lights stay plain. She smiles at how hard the brain works to fill space when a familiar mask doesn't appear. Sometimes the empty hook is the test. He watches the idea rub against expectation. Some faces want what they had. Some are ready for another lane. He learns a craft lesson. A title can be a bridge too strong for a detour. He does not dislike the bruise. It teaches him to label doors clearly. Next time, the word Halloween will mean the street you think it means. He files the anthology key in a drawer, not the trash. She leans into small props. a plastic mask rack, a clipboard in a break room, a map tacked with pins. The objects do much of the lifting. The frame says, "This is a workday, not a legend." That keeps the room from floating away. The story feels like a note someone could find in a forgotten file, clipped to a complaint about shipments and bills. He uses sound the way one might fold paper. The jingle is bright and simple on purpose. The rest of the mix is soft air and ordinary hum. The brightness cuts through the hum like a toy through wrapping. He lets it in, then turns it off. The silence that follows feels like a held breath. He trusts the held breath more than any punch. She watches the calendar page flip to late October and writes down how markets and holidays braid together. There is always a sale, always a countdown, always a reason to add something to a card. The film doesn't scold. It points at the clock on the wall and asks who set it. The question is enough. People hear questions louder than speeches. He ends on a note that does not close the box. A broadcast keeps going. A signal stays up. He does not punish the viewer for wanting an answer. He simply says, "Nights don't always land on zero. Sometimes the counter rolls into the morning and waits for someone else to notice." He turns the dial and lets snow fill the screen. The hiss is honest. She steps back and sees a lesson that will serve the whole series. The holiday is a house with many doors, but the porch light means a specific address for most visitors. Later, when the mask returns, it will be because rooms asked for that address by name. The detour remains a map pin, not the wrong street, just a street people visit less. He carries forward what worked, the way TV light paints a face, the way a tune can steer a crowd, the way companies talk about kids as units. He leaves behind what confused the signposts. He does not regret the walk. The hallway still leads back to the room where the mask waits on the table, patient, silent, ready to be ordinary and frightening again. He watches convention rooms bloom in small hotels. Folding tables hold posters that smell like marker ink. A fan asks for a signature and tells a story about their first late showing with a friend who squeezed their hand at the same beat. He nods and learns again that the film belongs to the people who carry it out of the theatre. He is only the first person to hold it. She sees magazines keep the flame when studios go quiet. Articles count masks, compare cuts, and trade rumours about rights. The pages keep October in reach during April and June. It is a long, slow breath taken between projects. She respects the patience of readers who build scrapbooks out of stills and ticket stubs. That, too, is storytelling. He notes how home video changes the relationship with fear. Pause, rewind, talk over. The audience becomes the editor at the coffee table. They find corners they missed in the dark. They notice a shadow in a window and decide whether it was planned. He does not mind the control. A shared text invites shared hands. The movie learns to live with being stopped mid-step. She meets the kids who grew up and bought cheap cameras. They copy the frame height, then break it on purpose to see what happens. Some tapes are clumsy and dear. Some have a spark that makes a room fall still. She encourages them to keep the walk steady and the lights honest. She tells them patience is a muscle that gets stronger if you use it. He hears late-night radio callers circle the myth. Was Michael a man? Was he a shape? Should a story choose? He smiles and thinks the choice was always the viewer's. The film offered a mirror and a metronome. People decided what they saw walking toward them. He writes a small line in his notebook. We lend them the mask, they bring the face. She feels the weight of anniversaries. 10 years since a certain night. 15. Cakes cut at small parties. A screening with a Q&A where the questions are half love letter, half repair request. Did you mean this? Why that cut? She answers carefully. Not to move the furniture in anyone's memory. A story is a house you keep dusted, not a room you repaint every year. He catalogues the ways the icon drifts into thrift stores, a mask with a cracked chin, a soundtrack on a cassette with the label bubbled, a VHS sleeve sun-faded to a gentle blue. He loves those objects more than mint copies. Wear means use. Use means spent with friends and bowls on tables and someone whispering, "Is that the window or the TV reflection?" She watches October in neighborhoods the way porches negotiate between welcome and caution. Lights timed, candy bowls placed, the small theater of handing something sweet to a stranger and saying a friendly word with the door still half closed. The film did not invent that, it only tuned the ear. Now the tune plays quietly, under the month. He remembers a panel where someone asked if the shape should stay dead. He said endings are a kindness when they arrive at the right time, but stories are more like weather than like statues. They return in patterns because people do. As long as streets look the same and houses breathe at night, someone will ask for the walk, the mask, the two notes. He shrugs and doesn't fight it. She notes the business side, rights shuffle, contracts lapse, names move between companies like boats, changing docks. The pause between films is not only creative, it is the time paper takes to find the right signature line. That part is not romantic, it is real. Real things set the stage for the next pretend. She accepts it as the cost of turning a key again. He ends the long quiet with a promise to the audience he cannot see. When the door opens next time, the room will still be plain, the camera will still be a person's height, and the fear will still come from waiting. He sets the mask in the center of the table. The room hums. October will ask again. He will answer, if he can, with the same honest pace. He opens the door on a street that looks older but not wiser. Patrol cars idle. A school flag moves slow. The mask feels both familiar and slightly wrong, the way a childhood street feels after years away. He lets that wrongness stand. Sequels are echoes in rooms that changed the chairs. The echo still maps to the same walls. She draws a new name on a notepad, Jamie. Small shoes, bright coat, careful eyes. The story shifts to the size of a child's steps. Adults argue in the background while the frame stays low. Fear at that height is all doors and knees and voices that mean well, but arrive late. She holds on small hands. The audience leans with them. He relearns how to stage a town in mild panic. Neighbors turn porch lights on too early. Store clerks watch the clock. A deputy taps the roof of his car without noticing. He threads the score thinner this time, like a line under a pencil sketch. He does not want to shout that Michael is back. He wants the town to say it for him with the way it moves. She likes the fall textures, paper leaves in windows, school hallways that smell like erasers, a costume aisle with two masks missing from hooks. The everyday details make room for the slow approach. The shape fits better when the background breathes. She gives the background time and trusts the viewer to meet her halfway. He brings back the doctor as an older, rougher compass. The voice is gravel. The eyes stay tired. He is still the person who points at the lock and says the word lock like it matters. The town hears him and pretends not to, then hears him again when the lights flicker. He is not beloved, he is useful, that can be better. She stages doorways and stairs like chess. A deputy chooses the wrong square because he is human, not because he is stupid. People do that under pressure. The frame forgives them even when it doesn't save them. She keeps the camera honest about space, how far, how fast, what blocks what. Fear is often a math you do without numbers. He lets a simple shot carry a heavy load, a figure in a streetlight gap, still, then gone. It takes less than a second, but the mind keeps it. He avoids flourish. If the shot felt like a trick, the spell would pinch. He trusts one breath, one absence, one return to move the room. It does. It always has. She keeps the violence off the desk. Aftermaths, not displays. Broken frames, fallen lamps, a jacket snagged on a nail. She knows some want more. She hopes they will notice the way the jacket tells more truth than any close-up ever could. People leave traces when fear passes by. The camera looks down and writes those traces gently. He finds something he likes in the way folks gather when they are scared. A living room turns into a watch post. Coffee on a table turns cold while eyes point at curtains. Someone whispers a plan that isn't very good, but everyone nods because it is something. He respects that. Doing something together is a human shield even when the plan fails. She ends on a beat that asks a question about inheritance. What we pass down is not always what we want. She does not raise her voice or underline the twist. She simply places a small object in a small hand and lets the room decide how it feels. The room is smart. It will carry the feeling into the next hallway. He closes the night without a sermon. The town is not safe, but it is morning. That is often how nights end. He files the return as proof that a simple walk can still hold a room. He knows the path will wobble in the years to come, but the line is still a line, a person moving forward, a mask that does not speak, a street that has to learn again how to breathe. He comes back to the same faces with one less hour of sleep on all of them. The town looks rubbed thin. Patrol patterns repeat. People try to live a normal day on top of a night that didn't end correctly. He keeps the camera close to hands and eyes. The scale is smaller, like a room where everyone talks quietly to avoid waking a sick child. She feels the weight of continuing a child's story. Jamie's world narrows to a few safe adults, a few not safe places, and the sound of her own breath when a hallway goes long. She treats silence as a language the girl knows well. The film respects that knowledge. Kids learn rooms faster than anyone. They pay for that skill with sleep. He lets the mask be a constant rather than a surprise. When a figure walks into the edge of the frame, the shock is not that he exists, but that he is here again. Repetition is its own fear. The metronome click the score carries becomes a tap on a table someone cannot stop making. He lowers it until it's almost subconscious. She plays with barns, riverside paths, and old houses whose corners don't meet because time pulled the wood apart. The places feel used, not set-dressed. That helps the steps feel like they have weight. Footfalls in dust prevent a story from floating. She keeps boots scuffing, doors sticking, windows that need a lift with the hip to open. He watches the doctor grind his voice down to a plea. He is still a warning bell, but bells crack. He begins to sound like a man arguing with a wall he built himself. There is sadness in that. He does not mock it. Older men lose friends to their own certainty. The town needs his certainty anyway. That contradiction sits in the middle of the frame. She treats law enforcement like neighbors with uniforms. They joke, they miss things, they double back, they keep showing up. She does not turn them into heroes or fools. She lets them be tired workers with keys and radios. The radios matter more than bravery. A good channel, a clear call, a door that opens when a voice asks. These save more lives than speeches. He threads in a small, almost private image he likes, a mask reflected in a window as a storm threatens, the reflection moving when the real figure doesn't. It's a trick of glass and angle. It also explains why rumors travel faster than facts. People see what they fear in any shiny surface. The film does not punish the eye for doing what eyes do. She keeps aftermaths tidy, not because the night is kind, but because the camera chooses respect. A broken banister, a lamp on its side, a spilled box of nails. The detail that lands might be a single nail in a floorboard where a hard step will find it later. She places it carefully and moves on. Life will notice it at the worst time without her help. He edges the ending toward a hold rather than a stop. A shape in custody does not mean safety. Locks give comfort, not prophecy. He wants the audience to hear those words without hearing them. So he lets a chain rattle just out of frame, a padlock shine, a wind work at a loose window in a concrete room. The mix says the rest. She leaves the door ajar for the next film without pointing. Sequels announce themselves loudly when they don't trust the room. She trusts it. People can feel a hinge loosening, even if no one says it. She turns off the lights and leaves one bulb humming. The hum is louder in the morning. That is a truth everyone learns eventually. He steps away knowing the map is getting tangled. He still believes the straight line through a house works, so he keeps that line strong even when the law thickens around it. A person walks. A town tries to sleep. A camera stands at the right height and does not blink. That is the spine. He tapes a note on the monitor that says so. He returns to a room full of strings pinned to a wall. Some viewers wanted answers. Answers arrive wearing robes and symbols, speaking a language that turns a blank idea into a diagram. He listens and decides to hold the camera steady and honest, even when the words want to drift into fog. If the frame is plain, the fancy parts can't tip it over. She splits the story in two cuts, both trying to rescue clarity from weight. The theatrical line holds one tone, the producer's line shifts emphasis. She empathizes with the editors who had to choose which breath to keep. Editing is often a choice between two goods that don't like each other. She keeps the scissors quiet and the joins clean. He keeps the shape moving like weather despite the chant in the background. A walk remains a walk. A door still opens when pushed. The myth hums, but the hinges speak louder. He is proud of the hinges. If the practical stays practical, the fancy has to meet it on the ground. That is how you keep a story from floating away in its own smoke. She uses radio callers and late-night talk as a Greek chorus. People in cars tell each other what the town feels like in language that mixes fact and rumor. The film treats the callers kindly. Gossip is often the first draft of shared fear. It can be ugly. It can also be a handrail when a community doesn't know which staircase it's on. He respects the attempt to thread origin into action, even as he prefers a face without a file. He shows documents briefly, diagrams quickly, and returns to rooms. Rooms are where stories stand. A kitchen chair with one loose leg tells more about danger than any stamp. He wobbles the chair once and lets the viewer feel it in their back. She keeps characters grounded, a mother making a fast decision, a neighbor counting windows, a man who thinks loud is the same as brave and learns it isn't. She likes the small failures that make people human, tripping on a shoe, forgetting a key, misreading a look. Those are not sins. They are the flaw of the genre. She cleans the floor and moves on. He places the score lower, a soft machinery under dialogue, to avoid competing with the plot's volume. When story voices rise, music should sit. When voices tire, music can tap a shoulder. He treats the theme like a clock in a quiet office, steady and slightly annoying, exactly the way time feels in the last hour of a bad shift. She ends both cuts with evidence that certainty is a costume. Even robe dancers slip, even diagrams smudge. She turns the camera toward the ordinary again. A hallway nobody checked, a door nobody labeled, a light that buzzes and then goes out. The film says that the blank face was always enough. The blank face will continue without a thesis. He hears the audience split and decides not to pick a fight. Taste is a map made of old knights. He's grateful people still show up with their maps in hand. He keeps his own folded in his pocket. Walk, mask, patience. He'll read it again next time before anyone starts arguing over arrows and legends. She files the experience as a chapter in a long book about how series try to explain themselves and sometimes forget that explanation is a spice, not a meal. She doesn't scold the cook. She sets the table for the next dish and hopes it will be simple and warm. People are hungry for simple and warm more often than not. He turns out the light on the Thorn room with a lesson. Even when law tangles, the street outside is still the street. A porch still creaks. A neighbour still checks the lock twice. If the camera returns to those planks and latches, the film will find its footing. He closes the door softly so the hinges will be ready for whoever opens it next. He pins the timeline on cork and draws lines with a dull pencil. One line runs from 1978 to 1981 and then forks. One path through 4, 5, 6 with symbols and smoke. Another skipping to a reunion years later. Off to the side sits a box labelled Anthology with a little lightning bolt doodled on it. He steps back. The map looks messy and true to life. She writes labels that sound like feelings, not fan terms. Blank Evil on the first line. Engineered Fate on the second. Different October on the box. She adds a note. Every branch thinks it is the main road while you're on it. That is how memory works. Context arrives late. The story should help the viewer be kind to their own prior maps. He considers how to guide new listeners. He chooses to start from the front porch every time. Street, house, window, walk. You can always teach a maze from the center, but a house from the door. He keeps the door policy simple for anyone arriving late. This respect lowers the room's shoulders. He hears the breath change when the rules are clear. She places Laurie's name along 2 paths and folds the paper where they split. The fold is neat. The character is one person held in different hands. She points to how she changes. More locks here, more humour there, more steel in one line, more ache in another. The map does not rank the versions. It marks them like towns along a river that once ran straight. He explains the idea of a requel without saying the word. Sometimes a story decides to treat sequels like dreams. It wakes up and says, let's start from the first memory. He keeps his voice even. No branch is wrong if it holds. The measure is whether the walk still feels like a walk and not a sprint or a dance it never learned. She adds a small legend in the corner, mask icon for entries with Michael, a pumpkin outline for the one that went another way, a musical note for projects where the score carried more than usual. She does not add a skull. Skulls promise a mood this series earned by quieter means. She chooses icons that look at home on a school map. He tapes a strip at the bottom that reads, "Continuity is a tool, not a cage." That gives permission for the next team to pick the road they can walk best. Audience trust doesn't come from honouring every old mile. It comes from walking the new mile with the same steady steps. He underlines steady twice, lightly, so the paper doesn't tear. She speaks to the viewer who feels lost. It's okay to have a favourite thread. It's okay to skip. The porch light will be on if you come back. None of this is homework. October is for neighbours telling each other where the loose step is on the stoop and laughing when they forget again next year. The laugh is part of the ritual. He plants an engagement line softly. He wonders what path late listeners took first and what screen they used. TV on a dresser, phone under a blanket, projector in a backyard with a sheet for a screen. He asks them to note the time on their clock and where they are listening from. The map grows warmer when the comments fill with pins. She folds the paper and slides it into a manila envelope marked Roots. She sets it beside the mask in a box that smells like cardboard and old tape. She smiles at the organisation. Messy myths still like neat drawers. The order will help when the door opens to the next hallway. The mask waits, the pencil dulls. October inches closer. He turns the room lights down and lets the map sit in his mind. Choices will keep coming. That is the strength and the hazard of long stories. He promises the viewer that whatever path they choose next, the camera will keep to the human height. The music will count rather than shout, and the doors will sound like real wood when they shut. He means it. He opens on a different coast with air that smells like eucalyptus and old paper. A campus keeps its lights low after curfew. He finds Laurie living under a new name, counting the ways out of every room she enters. Locks are habits now, not props. She teaches, she watches, she breathes like someone who has learned to share oxygen with memory. He lets the camera honor the routine. She writes Laurie's mornings with ordinary grace, coffee, roll call, a stack of essays with soft pencil notes in the margins. Fear makes some people harsh. It made her careful. She checks window latches the way others check their phone. She smiles when she can, a small upward line that refuses to vanish. The film treats that smile like a lamp the room needs. He keeps the mask in the trunk of the story until the road is ready. When it appears, it is not a trumpet blast. It is a silhouette in a doorway you thought was exit only. The score does not lunge. It counts a private heartbeat and steps aside. 20 years is a long time to hold your shoulders up. He shows what it looks like when a person sets them down and then has to lift them again. She frames the reunion like two magnets finding each other across a desk full of papers. No magic, only a quiet line drawing itself along the surface. The spaces are school spaces, glass doors, long corridors, a cafeteria that echoes after hours. The film folds October into this place without pumpkins or porches. A walk in linoleum sounds different. It still lands. He writes Laurie as someone who plans for bad nights with the same focus others plan a vacation. She knows where the keys go, where the phone lives, which lights lie about being bright. Preparation is not paranoia, it is love for the people who share your address. He lets that love lead the action. It makes every choice feel like breath, not pose. She brings in a child with a voice that calls her into the present. Fear likes to pull people backwards. A kid pulls forward. The film respects how a parent's eyes split their attention. Threat, path, child, path, threat. She keeps cuts clean so the mind can do that math without stumbling. Clarity is kindness in a corridor. He trims quips and lets silence hold the weight. 20 years burn away chat. When Laurie speaks, it is to name a door, a direction, a decision. He trusts the audience to hear what sits under the words. They are old enough now. Many of them have walked nights that changed how they talk. She designs a final space like a box drawn with a ruler. No tricks, no secret hinges, only corners you can trust, and a line through the middle that cannot be misread. Showdown without spectacle. She gives Laurie the geometry and asks her to solve for X. The answer is not perfect, it is enough. Enough is a holy word in this genre. He keeps the camera at human height even when the story wants to jump. Restraint lets the last beats feel like choices, not stunts. He likes the sound of a single key turning more than any explosion. Metal on metal, then stillness. In stillness, people hear their own breath. That is where truth sits. She closes the branch with a dignity that looks like a closed binder. A hand smooths the cover. A date goes on the spine. Laurie does not become small because she put the folder away. She becomes possible. He steps out into night air that smells like sprinklers on a field after last bell and decides that is the right ending tone for a chapter. He leaves a chair pulled back from a desk as if someone just stood. The room will need it again, maybe too soon, maybe not soon enough for those who wanted peace to last. He does not promise. He only promises the camera will be careful when it returns and that it will keep the walk honest if the door opens again. He enters a house wired like a patient in a sleep study, Cameras stare from corners, cords snake along baseboards, a showrunner whispers about engagement. The series steps into a room where watching is the point, and he chooses to look without sneer. Spectacle is a costume the culture tried on that year. He will not pretend it never fit. She lets the house speak. Once it was a private map, now it is a set. The kitchen light is harsh, the stairs look cleaner than any real stairs should. She notes how fear changes when it has to share space with an audience counting clicks. People act different when they think they are being watched. The shape does not. That contrast is the only edge worth holding. He pulls the score back and lets beeps and chatter do the counting. The heart of the night becomes a timeline at the bottom of a screen. He misses the metronome, but he listens for human breath behind jokes and dares. It is still there. When someone thinks they hear a footstep out of pattern, they go quiet on instinct. Instinct is why this story keeps surviving new skin. She respects Laurie's last stand even if the branch wobbles. Closure is cruel when forced and gentle when earned. She frames her exit with clean lines and simple intention. A person decides to be done. The world rarely allows it, but the decision stands even when the world argues. She writes that as a blessing over the rest of the mess. He treats the experiment as a time capsule. Early internet energy, bravado in headsets, producers asking for bigger. He does not scold. He sets the camera at the height of a human again and waits for a moment when the set becomes a house by accident, the instant a door swings and someone forgets to perform. In that instant, the old current runs under the floor. She keeps the consequences tidy. Spectacle sells risk it cannot handle. The house, indifferent as always, checks those claims. She points the lens at the check, not at the sale. In the aftermath, the screens look small. Cables look like snakes made of rubber. A broom waits in the corner, ready to return the place to silence. She loves the broom more than the gear. He lets humor pass through like weather. A joke can keep a viewer breathing. He refuses to let jokes draw blood. The line is there for any filmmaker who cares to see it. He keeps his toe on it, steady. A chuckle fades, a footstep stays. The footstep is the clock that never quite loses its job. She ends the branch with a shrug that is not disrespect. Not every corridor leads to a room you want to sleep in. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have walked it. You learned where the floor sags. You learned which window sticks. Those notes will save time later. She tapes them inside a cabinet and closes the door. He leaves the set as crew coil cable and fold chairs. The house looks like a house again in 5 minutes. That's the magic he respects most, how fast pretend erases itself if you let it. The yard goes quiet. A neighbor's dog barks. The sky puts a lid on the roof. October makes a small promise to be itself again next year. She files this chapter under Curiosity Tried. The series can bend. It shouldn't always. The walk prefers wood to wire. The mask likes to read rooms, not ratings. Those truths sit there, patient, while the industry spins around them. She trusts patience more than spin. Patience wins in the long cut. He opens a new folder labeled Alternate. The paper inside smells like machine oil and grit. Childhood steps onto the page with heavy boots. He listens. This corridor speaks in a different register, less whisper, more gravel. He decides to hold the same rules: human height, steady walk, rooms instead of dioramas. If the voice is rougher, the grammar can stay clean. She writes a boys' room without apology, posters, noise, a door that does more blocking than welcoming. Backstory is a risk. It can turn a mirror into a manual. She tries to let detail live without excuse-making. A mask in this context is a wall a child builds to survive an onslaught of sound. She doesn't bless the wall, she names it. He lets the camera sit in the kitchen longer than is comfortable. Noise behaves like weather here too, but it's thunder that never moves on. When silence comes, it's the kind that follows a slammed door, not the kind that comes from peace. He uses very little score. The house has enough hum to carry a bad night all by itself. She treats violence as stain rather than spectacle. The cut looks away. The room remains. Afterwards, sinks run, towels move, voices drop. She refuses to be impressed by damage even when the scene begs her to be. That refusal is a style choice and a moral one. Her frame keeps its back straight. He follows the mask from garage shelf to face like a tool passed down with the wrong instructions. In this telling, the mask means an attempt to become a thing that cannot be hurt. He understands the psychology even as he worries about the cost to mystery. He writes a small line in his notebook. When you label a thunderhead, it still rains. She honors the craft, new textures, different color temperatures, a walk that feels heavier on old wood. The viewer can dislike the tone and still see the care in a dolly move that respects corners. She insists on that respect. Films talk to each other across tastes. The language is angles and cuts. He notices the audience split again, this time along the border between tell me more and tell me less. He doesn't arbitrate. He watches faces on exit. Some look relieved to have a reason. Some look sad that the mirror now has a frame. Frames are useful. Mirrors catch more when they have none. He nods to both truths. She builds Laurie with kindness in this world too. Different house, different laughter, same soft stubbornness. She plants small gestures that show how a teen hears a night changing before the adults do. The way a song stops making sense. The way a friend's joke lands wrong. Adolescence is a horror genre on its own. This story borrows the texture without mocking it. He keeps the last third closer to the old grammar. Stalk, search, door, breath. In that stretch, the two versions shake hands. He lets the handshake linger. Whatever origin you prefer, the corridor's measurements haven't changed. Distance between rooms, number of locks, time to cross a yard. Viewers feel safe when the math returns. She closes with an image that aches, a mask on a floor scuffed by years of steps. The scuffs are the best writing in the shot. Homes record us without consent. We apologize by sweeping and, sometimes, by leaving. She lets the broom wait in the corner. Someone else will use it in a different decade. The corner is patient. He files this branch under experiment that found its own audience. The main street still stands outside. He will return to it soon, not to correct this, but to continue the older sentence that paused mid-clause in 1978. Stories can be parallel without being enemies. He writes that and underlines it once. He picks up where the new voice left off, in a world where nights bleed into days with no apology. The colors cool. The rooms feel found, not dressed. He stays small and close, because anything bigger would wobble. The film asks if a mask can crack without falling apart. He watches the hairline lines and decides they matter more than any speech. She writes dream logic as a texture, not a thesis. Images repeat like habits. A hallway recurs with a different light. A face appears in the wrong frame and refuses to leave. She knows some viewers will step off here. That's allowed. A story can test a pace and still return to the road later. She keeps her sentences short so the audience doesn't trip. He lets violence remain off camera whenever he has the vote. When the frame must show impact, he refuses to decorate it. He places the microphone on the far wall where it records how sound behaves after the moment. The air going thin, the clatter of something small rolling to a stop. The human ear understands aftermath better than depiction. She holds Laurie as someone trying to rebuild a house with mismatched screws. Healing is loud in this world. She hands the character quiet too whenever there's space, sitting on a curb at dusk, sharing a plastic cup of water, looking at a streetlight flicker. The film needs these sips. Without them, there's no point to surviving. He reduces the theme to a pulse and lets other noises take solos. Dinnerware in a sink, insects that haven't read the script, a truck downshifting 2 blocks away. The landscape talks even when people don't. He respects that chatter. It makes the mask less operatic and more like a mistake repeating itself. She resists the urge to make symbols do all the work. A white horse can be an interesting picture and a thin meaning. She uses it as weather. Sometimes it tells you a front is moving. Sometimes it's just a cloud that looks like something. When in doubt, she returns to rooms. Rooms never lie. He keeps shots long enough to test patience, but short enough to avoid pomp. If you hold a frame, a beat beyond comfort, truth often enters. He times the beat by breath, not by stopwatch. The human diaphragm is a better editor than a minute hand. He trusts the chest more than the clock. She ends this branch by closing the notebook rather than finishing the sentence. That frustrates some. It frees others. She draws a soft line under the last scene and writes, "Different road ends here." Then she looks out the window toward a familiar block where the porch light is still on. The main street hasn't moved an inch. He thanks the players for trying a key the melody hadn't used. Not every variation becomes a standard. The standard still feeds the room. He dusts the old sheet music and places it on the stand, not with smugness, but with gratitude for the simple tune that never needed a bridge. She exhales and makes space for what's next. A reset without spite is a gift. Viewers sense when a film respects its past selves, even the awkward ones. Respect keeps a series from eating its own. Patience invites the right kind of hunger. October is close enough to smell on the air again. She opens the window. He sits at a table with contracts and coffee rings. Creativity waits while pens move. The room has no posters, only binders. He respects this work more than he enjoys it. Stories are not only told in cameras and microphones, they are told in signatures and expiration dates. He listens to the hush of carpeted hallways and calls it part of the process. She meets with people who carry the first film in their pocket like a lucky coin. They speak gently about what they loved. They disagree kindly about what to do next. That tone matters. Many projects die from voices that sharpen each other into knives. This one might live because the room stays soft while the ideas stay firm. He watches anniversaries go by with screenings that feel like town meetings. Audiences arrive with new kids who haven't seen it big. Gasps land in the same places. Laughs glide where they always did. He times the beats by the crowd and finds them unchanged. The metronome belongs to the street, not to a disc. She hears a pitch. What if the story woke up from the first film and let all the other nights become dreams? Not an insult, an edit, like clearing a chalkboard and writing the next line in big, new letters. She tilts her head and sees the merit. Memory is messy. Sometimes it needs a clean shelf. He thinks of Laurie older, living with routines that kept her alive and also kept her alone. He trusts her to carry a whole frame by doing the dishes at dusk. If the series is going home, it should bring the oldest questions in with it. Can you be safe and open? Can a town learn? Can a mask be only a mask? She walks locations with old bones, porches close to sidewalks, kitchens with windows over sinks, yards where fences need paint. She picks places that age like people, slower, softer, with a few sharp edges that catch sleeves. The camera will be kind to these corners. Kindness makes fear more honest. He writes a note to the future score. Do less, tune lower, let wood creak, let air carry. Synths can come back like friends you haven't seen since youth. Familiar, thinner, still themselves. He avoids nostalgia as syrup, a light brush, one phrase. Then silence to let the room breathe through older lungs. She keeps a file called Town. Inside, names for neighbours, bad habits at the local bar, which streetlight flickers, who locks the school gate at 9. When a sequel loves its town, the town holds the story up when the plot needs a moment to swallow. She loves towns, even the ones that forget how to listen. He smiles at the idea of beginning again without erasing the archive. The old films still exist. They don't need to be buried to grow a new branch. He draws a tree with parallel lines. Fruit can hang on more than one limb. That picture makes the room calmer. Calm rooms sign better deals. She places a final sticky note on the stack. Direct sequel to 78. Same street, same walk, different years on the faces. She underlines years, not same. Time will be the co-star. Time always was. Now it gets a few lines of dialogue. The pens stop. The printer hums. The door opens. He stands, stretches, and listens to the hall sound like a hall. Even this sterile place has a heartbeat if you are patient. Contracts go into folders. Folders go into bags. People who care about a porch light leave the building and look up. The sky has the colour that means October might be thinking about arriving. He sets the camera on the old street and lets the wind do the opening line. Leaves skate. A mailbox clacks. A neighbour waves without stopping. The mask returns not as an announcement but as a fact the town forgot to delete. He keeps the lens sober. The trick is no trick. Begin where the breathing started. She writes Laurie with hands that know work, shaping wood, checking shells, straightening a drawer that will see use. Survival is a craft she learned in the years other people used for holidays. She is not a prophecy. She is a person who chose to get good at specific motions. The film respects practice more than destiny. He tunes the theme like a heartbeat heard through a wall, muffled, steady, a little older. Notes land with the weight of memory. He lets silence answer half the questions. When he brings in the higher figure, it's a ghost of itself, which is exactly what a memory should sound like under the porch light. She writes 3 generations sharing a table that has seen spills and apologies. Fear's shadow stretches across plates. People love one another poorly and then better. She is careful with the better. It does not sparkle. It shows up on time with a toolbox. The film finds more hope in a fixed hinge than in any speech. He frames the town as a character that wants a clean story and keeps getting the messy one. People say old lines with new mouths. We're fine, it was long ago. Locks are for other streets. He lets them talk. He likes how a community tries to self-soothe. He knows it won't hold. He does not gloat when it doesn't. She positions the mask at edges until it decides to be center. A figure beyond a gate. A reflection in a window you were cleaning. A shape in daylight which is somehow colder than at night because day promised protection. The camera calls no scene sacred. Grocery aisles can be as haunted as alleys. She gives aisles their due. He aims the violence like weather, local, fast, not poetic. After the air feels wrong and people try to fix it with routine, sweeping, closing, calling. He dwells 2 beats longer on the calls, how voices try to carry others across sudden distance. Phone lines are bridges, bridges sway. He respects the sway. She lets the town collect itself into a chorus without a conductor. Old faces recall old terror and sing the verse they remember. Some harmonize poorly. The film allows the noise. In noise you can hear who believes what safety costs. That question is the plot under the plot. She underlines it softly with traffic sounds. He keeps Laurie's preparations from turning into fetish. Tools are tools. Plans are plans. What matters is the person using them, shaking a little, breathing through it. He keeps the lens on her eyes when the door finally does the thing it was built to do. Doors don't win. People using doors do. She resolves the night not with victory but with proof of intent. Fire is not justice, it is a lid. Lids shift when houses settle. She leaves space for the lid to clatter. That is not cynicism, it is physics. The camera holds the heat until the shot hurts. Then it turns away to the sky, which doesn't care, and therefore tells the truth. He steps outside the smoke and listens for the old metronome under sirens. It's still there. The town, chastened, counts with it now. Counting is a way to keep breathing when you can't trust air. He lets the credits take their time. People walking to cars need a slow fade to remember where they parked in the larger story. He opens on a town that tries to talk louder than fear. Porches spill voices into the street. Old stories get told like weather reports, precise and wrong in familiar ways. He listens for the beat under the chatter and hears boots on pavement, steady as a metronome that never learned to speed up. She writes neighbors as a choir without a conductor. A bar TV hums, names pass from mouth to mouth until they turn into a chant. She lets the chant live as sound, not verdict. Crowds promise safety they can't actually give. The camera stays close to hands holding flashlights that shake a little. He treats the mask like a rumor that keeps proving itself. A glimpse at the edge of a cul-de-sac, a shadow across a kitchen tile. He lets the score step back and leaves room for breath and gravel. When many feet move at once, fear changes shape. It grows blunt. He records the bluntness. She frames houses as islands lit by porch bulbs. People hop between them, calling names, making lists no one will read tomorrow. She respects the intention. A town trying is still a town. She shows the trying with maps scrawled on napkins, with jackets thrown over chairs, with coffee poured and left. And he studies the sentence that becomes a banner. 3 words that sound like a solution when the night is long. He doesn't mock it. He hears the need inside it, an ache to finish a story cleanly. Stories rarely end on command. He lets the banner ripple and then sag when the wind shifts. She places old survivors in scenes like anchors. Their eyes carry decades of measurements, which doors held, which bolts slipped, which radios failed. They talk with a softness that doesn't slow the room. Younger faces lean in and borrow steadiness. Steadiness is the best prop you can hand a crowd, and he keeps the path honest. A plan drawn too fast misses stairs and fences. He shows the misses with small stumbles and course corrections. The mask never hurries to meet them halfway. That's the cruelty of physics, mass and pace, not drama. He lets physics be the villain when the mask doesn't need to be. She catches moments when courage and confusion share the same frame. A neighbor opens a door at the wrong time with the right heart. Another closes a window 1 beat too late and learns a new respect for latches. She refuses to turn mistakes into punchlines. Fear taxes everyone's math. He drops the theme into the mix like a lighthouse across fog, brief, repeating, not rescuing anyone, only telling them where the rocks are. People still drive too close to the light because it feels like help. He knows that feeling. He's followed songs down worse alleys and been grateful for the company. She allows grief to be messy and immediate. Kitchens hold it, yards hold it. She doesn't let the camera blink when quiet arrives, because quiet after shouting feels like a floor giving way. The town sits down at strange hours. A dog whines at a door. Someone checks a lock twice without noticing. He leaves the night without a moral, only a mirror. Crowds can save, and crowds can fail, often in the same hour. The mask doesn't care either way. It moves like weather crossing a county line. He folds the map and writes a small note on the back. Remember, individuals. Then turns the page, section 20, 2022. Quiet end. He opens on a town cooling. Lawns go to seed a little. People speak softer, not lighter. He notices how a place learns to live with something it never wanted, like a draft through a window you never quite fix. The mask is elsewhere. The absence feels heavy, which is a strange sentence until you live in it. She writes Laurie learning to set a table again without counting the exits every time. She still counts, but she also laughs at apples in the market and the price of flour. Healing is mundane. She lets the mundane win frames on purpose. Sun on a sink, leaves in a gutter, a pen on a grocery list. He treats the score like an old heartbeat that sometimes forgets to enter. Silence says more this time. When the theme arrives, it is a visitor with good manners, short, low, then gone. He wants the room to hear the difference between readiness and dread. Both have a tempo, only one lets people sleep. She introduces a new face who carries a town's suspicion like a coat, 2 sizes too big. The story asks whether stories can stain people who didn't make them. She lets him move through rooms slowly enough for the viewer to decide. The camera does not pass sentence, it watches a sentence form. He keeps the mask peripheral for as long as possible. The idea must do the walking this time. When the figure enters properly, it feels like a season breaking early. Rain in August, frost in September. He makes the first true reveal quiet. The loudest part is a breath that hits a microphone by accident. She stages kitchens more than corridors. Endings live in kitchens, lists, leftovers, apologies. She keeps the fight small when it must happen. Small fights are harder to cheat. You can feel where the elbow hits the shelf and which drawer sticks. The house participates. Houses always do. He lets time be a character, not a device. Years stack in the way hands hold objects, in the pace of getting up from a chair, in the way people look out the window before they answer a knock. He records those seconds. They're the ones the genre often spends too quickly. He saves them for this. She makes room for the town to admit it cannot be one thing. Some forgive themselves for surviving, some don't. Some forgive the story for returning. Some never will. She doesn't herd them. She walks a block and lets porches hold their opinions. October is a poll no one tallies. He places the final meeting in geography that both parties deserve. No grand arena, no borrowed cathedral, just rooms that have earned their scuffs. He drops tools and words from the air. He keeps breath and distance, choices, not choreography. The camera trusts wrists and eyes. She writes an ending that closes a book without burning the library. The mask can sleep. The street can gossip about something else. Laurie can cook with the window open if she wants. She adds a line about pies cooling that sounds corny on paper and perfect in the room. Corny is a knife that only cuts when you need it. He steps outside into a season that feels like a soft coat. He listens for the old metronome and hears it far away like a clock in a museum. He smiles without triumph. Survival is not triumph. It is breath. He lets the credits pass like a quiet parade for small victories. Locks replaced, bulbs changed, chairs pulled closer to tables. He lays photos on a table, babysitter's sweater, teacher's cardigan, flannel in a workshop, a robe at night in a kitchen with a light over the sink. The faces line up like years do, each one holding a new version of the same promise. She will try to keep people safe, starting with the ones in the room. She writes Laurie as someone whose toolkit changes but whose hands stay gentle. In one branch, she hides steel in drawers. In another, she hides softness in jokes. Both are the same patient person. She marks the way eyes move first, then shoulders, then feet. Eyes always lead. Fear only thinks it does. Thinks. He hears her in the music more than in dialogue. When she is centered, the theme sits back. When she is cornered, the theme taps her shoulder, not to push, but to count breaths with her. He keeps that packed across cuts like a friend who knows when to talk and when to listen. She measures the space she takes up in a room. Early, she tries to be smaller to not wake the house. Later, she tries to be bigger so the house will back up. The right size is a moving target. She forgives herself on the days she misses. The camera forgives her too by simply staying. He notes how she treats tools as tasks, not trophies. A lock gets changed because it needed changing. A drawer gets organized, then reorganized, then left open because a person came over to talk and the conversation mattered more. He loves the open drawer. It means life outran fear for an hour. She draws boundaries without speeches. A hand up, a door left half closed, a car parked nose out. The film reads those as sentences and lets them be. Viewers who know, know. Viewers who don't, learn without a lecture. Teaching by posture lasts longer than teaching by monologue. He tracks her kindness under pressure. She asks for names. She gives directions that are short and possible. He records the way people breathe better when she's in the frame. That's a leader, not a warrior. The genre undersells leaders. He tries not to. He sets the light gently. She admits fear without feeding it. There's a difference. One says, "I'm scared," and waits for help. The other says, "I'm scared," and runs down hallways to keep the feeling alive. She does the first. The camera thanks her with time and clean lines across the floor. He watches her lose and choose again, which is more impressive than winning. Choosing again is the story after the story, the part a parade never shows. He writes a small salute into the cut, an extra beat where she looks at a window and every version of herself looks back and nods. She finds a late comfort that doesn't erase earlier aches. She bakes. She laughs at a bad pun. She lets a chair scrape the floor without flinching. These tiny wins add up to a whole person who earned sleep. She is not an idea. She is a citizen of a town that finally learned how to share the night. He sets down his pencil and lets the table of photos sit in quiet. The best tribute to a character is space. Space to breathe, space to be ordinary, space to stop performing for a genre. He leaves the room with the light off and trusts she'll find the switch if she wants it on. He places the mask on a plain chair and waits. Light does most of the work. Overhead makes it flat. Side makes it a question. Back makes it a hole. He turns the lamp a few degrees and watches the face change without moving. This is why the object lasts. It lets light write. She catalogues gestures that make the shape speak. A tilt when something is interesting. A pause when space needs to be measured. A step that chooses center line over angle. No swagger, no slouch. Only that patient insistence that reads as confidence in broad daylight and hate in a hallway. He treats the knife as punctuation, not poetry. A period you see from across a room. The sentence is the walk. If you shoot the period bigger than the clause, the grammar breaks. He keeps the balance. Viewers feel balance even if they never learned the rules. Language lives in bodies. She writes about windows as verbs. A window frames, reveals, refuses, reflects. In this series, a window often accuses, "Why didn't you close me? Why didn't you look sooner?" She declines to shame. Houses are collaborations. They want help. People forget. The camera forgives and keeps teaching. He listens to floorboards like consonants. Each step has a timbre that tells you what year the house was built and who has walked it thin. He captures the tone without exaggeration. Good microphones make better horror than gallons of anything. He places them low, where boots speak. She inventories distances, hedge to porch, porch to door, door to hall, hall to last room on the left. She writes numbers quietly on a paper no one will see. The viewer feels those numbers as comfort when the scene obeys geometry, and as dread when geometry fails by a single foot. He respects the negative space around the mask. An empty doorway is a sentence with a missing word. The brain supplies it. He points the lens at that doorway often enough to train the eye, and then removes the reward. Training is a gift and a trap. He uses both without being cruel. She treats daylight like the real test. Night forgives sloppy edges. Day demands honest lines. If a figure can unsettle a cul-de-sac at 3 in the afternoon, the craft is sound. She hangs laundry and lets breeze do the moving. Cloth can frighten more than thunder if you point right. He trims score to a pulse and one high phrase. He refuses to decorate. Decoration dates. A pulse and a phrase are bones. Bones last. He lets silence dress them because silence changes every year and keeps the body current. The room supplies new clothes for old frames. She adds one last note about the mask. It is only powerful because the person under it refuses to narrate. The genre is full of speeches that rot the minute they hit air. This one stays blank. Blank is dangerous. Blank makes mirrors in windows. She leaves it blank and ends the paragraph. He puts the mask back on the chair and turns out the lamp. In darkness it is only latex, only a curve. In memory it is a whole language spoken with breath and door frames. He leaves the room smiling at how many words a quiet face can say when a camera stays respectful. He walks past porches in October and sees pumpkins carved with triangles that look like the mask taught them to be simple. Decorations have learned restraint from a film that refused to shout. He takes a small pride in that, how minimalism became a neighborhood accent for a month each year. She notes playlists that spin the 2-note figure between pop songs in supermarkets. Shoppers don't flinch, they smirk, then check the time. That's power, a cue that marks a season without demanding attention. She prefers that kind of fame to fireworks. Quiet things keep jobs longer. He watches imitators chase the wrong lesson, blood over breath, spectacle over space. He doesn't scold on paper, he sets screenings and lets the room show the math. Rooms tire of noise, they lean into patience when given the chance. He's learned to trust rooms more than reviews. She visits conventions where kids with foam knives learn to walk without bouncing. They are proud of their stillness. She compliments it and asks them to carry the same stillness into hallways at school when someone looks lost. Craft is portable. Horror, taught gently, becomes kindness elsewhere. He catalogues parodies with affection. Jokes sharpen edges and keep myths from swallowing daylight. A good parody respects the meter even while it flips the rhyme. He laughs at the ones that understand the door, the window, the breath. He turns off the ones that confuse volume with wit. She talks with police and EMTs who mention the films in passing, the way you mention the weather before you say the thing that matters. Art becomes small talk when it wins. That is not an insult, it means it's in the water. Once it's in the water, it can cool tempers before worse sentences are spoken. He sees the mask on shelves every fall, cheaper now, thinner, still working under porch bulbs. He likes the wrong colours and the bad hair. They prove the idea survives poor materials. If a shadow and a walk can fix a bad mask, the language is truly learned. He tips his hat to bad masks everywhere. She pays attention to classrooms that use the first film to teach blocking and tension. Students count steps, draw maps, and discover geometry's role in emotion. She loves that most. If fear can lead to better drawing, to kinder camera placement, to respect for faces, the genre earned its keep. He remembers the letters from people who slept easier because the movie gave their fear a frame with rules. Knowing where doors are in a story helps you find them in a night. He never planned that service. He's grateful. If art can hand out small flashlights, October feels less long. She closes her notebook on influence with a small truth. Echoes fade unless people keep singing. The right ones deserve a hum while washing dishes, a whistle on a walk, a memory in a grocery line. She hums 2 notes and smiles at a stranger who hums them back without looking up. He steps into evening as kids test costumes in the yard. A porch light clicks on earlier than it needs to. Somewhere a neighbor plays the theme too loud and someone else laughs. The month has a voice. It isn't owned. It was borrowed, shaped, and returned. He listens until the timer kills the bulb. He rolls the paper map of timelines and slips a rubber band over it, careful not to crease the corner where the first night sits. The box on his desk smells like cardboard and old glue. He labels the spine with a pencil so faint you have to tilt the room to read it. That feels correct for a quiet saga. She places the mask in tissue like a museum intern who knows the difference between reverence and fuss. It's just an object. It held a world. Both can be true. She sets a small note beside it. Do not explain. She laughs at herself, then leaves the note anyway. Reminders help on tired days. He walks the old street one more time in memory. Mailboxes, hedges, windows with plants that outlived their pots. He counts the steps between porch and curb the way he did when the idea was new. The numbers haven't changed. That comforts him more than any award ever did. She thanks the late listeners in a tone that doesn't wake sleeping houses. She asks where they are and what time their screen shows. She invites a small ritual, city, hour, whether they're on headphones, phone, TV, or a quiet car in a driveway. A night map in the comments is a soft quilt. He sets the music down to almost nothing, a pulse you might confuse with the house settling. When it stops, the relief is real. Relief is the cousin of fear. Both prove you were paying attention. He lets the silence stand without apology. Silence is the final credit and deserves its own card. She leaves the viewer with one gentle practice. When you enter a room, notice the doors. When you leave, notice the lights. That's not paranoia. It's courtesy to the house and to yourself. Stories taught her that kindness to spaces is kindness to people. She keeps that lesson folded in her pocket. He turns the porch light off, then on, then off again, to check the switch. It works. Systems you can trust make sleep larger. He straightens a doormat that had turned itself east for no reason. Small order, small peace. He gives himself permission to call that enough. She closes the window and leaves the curtain 1 inch open. A room breathes better with a line to the street. She sets the pen beside a blank card for next time. There is always a next time, but it doesn't need to arrive tonight. October will roll around. Doors will creak on schedule. He steps away from the desk and does not look back. The mask stays in its paper. The map rests. The chair waits for another story that knows how to walk. He switches off the lamp and listens to the absence until it becomes ordinary again. Ordinary is the goal. Ordinary is victory. She whispers a last thank you to the town that existed because people believed in sidewalks and hedges and the way breath sounds in the dark. She invites dreams that are boring in the best way, grocery lists, dog walks, slow mornings. Boring keeps the bad nights small. Boring is a kind of spell. He leaves the room how he found it, light low, chair pushed in, window line thin as a pencil stroke. Somewhere down the block, a timer clicks and a porch bulb blinks out. The street holds still. The night keeps its own watch. The story files itself and sleeps. So should we. He sets the tripod so the lens meets a human gaze on a porch. At this height, fences are lines, hedges are soft walls, and mailboxes mark time like notes on a staff. He tests a tiny dolly forward and watches the frame breathe instead of boast. The street doesn't tilt or shout. It simply arrives, one rectangle at a time, like someone you trust, walking beside you without touching your sleeve. She lets practical light do the heavy lifting, a porch bulb, a kitchen shade, a street lamp buzzing through moths, honest sources that flatten lies and deepen corners. She maps which bulbs hum and which smear. The mask belongs to whatever the room already owns. If a lamp names the cheekbone and leaves the eye a question, the shot answers more than any speech. Light writes, the camera signs its name small. He composes with doors and hallways as rulers. Vertical lines steady the heart. Horizontals act like shelves that hold choices. When a line bends, the pulse notices before the mind does. He keeps frames level so panic has to earn its shake. A figure entering mid-frame feels like weather, not a cue. Geometry becomes a quiet law. When a scene breaks it, the viewer knows something changed without a single chord. She favors foreground that proves the place is lived in, a banister, a jacket sleeve, a plant leaf soft in the corner. These layers make the air visible and the distance measurable. If the mask drifts between those layers, the eye believes the room before it believes the threat. She trusts the room. Houses are the best actors, steady, tireless, unable to fake. A steady house makes a shaky breath read true. He keeps the lens at 35 to 40 millimeters when streets need to feel like streets. Wider, and the world bends into bragging. Longer, and it spies. Here, faces stay honest and sidewalks stay straight. He steps close instead of zooming. Close is a promise the viewer can feel in their shoulders. The walk becomes real distance, not a trick of glass. When the figure crosses, the frame doesn't flinch. People do. She lets the camera move like a careful person. A breath, a step, a listen. No whipping, no lunges. A slow push to a window teaches the eye to meet glass without greed. A patient pan invites hedges to pass like pages. When the frame finally stops, the stillness feels earned, and the doorway holds more weight than it did a second ago. Motion is grammar. Polite grammar makes impolite moments land harder. He treats negative space as a sentence with a missing word. An empty doorway is an invitation the brain rushes to fill. He points once, twice, 3 times, and withholds the reward until the viewer starts to write their own line. When the shape finally rents the space for a second, it feels like a promise kept and a lesson learned. He doesn't linger. The best acknowledgements are brief, the way a nod is brief. She matches camera height to the person in danger. With a child, the counter becomes a wall. Shoes become landmarks. Thresholds grow. With an adult, the same hallway shortens by a step. She counts steps out loud when she scouts. Hedge to porch, porch to latch, latch to lamp pull. The counts go in a pocket notebook. Numbers are comfort food in a long night. Viewers taste them even if they never see them. He respects windows as verbs, not decorations. A window frames, refuses, reflects, and sometimes accuses. He tilts a lamp so glass gives 2 stories at once, inside and out, without breaking either. If a face becomes a smear and a hedge becomes a line across it, the mind files both as true. He avoids perfect panes. A streak, a sticker corner, a tiny warp near the edge, keep the world slightly disobedient, which reads as real. She underexposes a hair and lets shadow stay shadow. Black is a room, not a hole. If the mask drifts through that room, the whites of the world don't scream. Contrast sits where it belongs, in decisions, not in settings. She allows grain to live, the way dust lives in sun. Texture makes silence louder. A smooth picture lies about the hour. Night should look like something you can smell. He ends where he began. Shoulder height, straight horizon, doorframe square. The lens refuses to gloat over what it knows. It behaves like a witness with good manners, present, patient, precise. When the figure finally crosses the center line, no tilt sells the moment, and no sting buys it. The walk does the work. The house does the harmony. The shot exhales and steps back, the way a neighbor would after saying, "Lock up." He sets a metronome on the table and waits until the room's breathing matches it. The click isn't music, it's a step you hear before a door. He plays 2 notes, one low, one higher, and lets the space between them carry most of the message. The gap feels like a hallway. The ear walks it without help. She keeps instruments small and close, a dry piano key, a thin synth that sounds like a streetlight hum, a soft thud under the floor, more heartbeat than drum. She removes everything that explains too much. With fewer voices, the air can do its job. Air makes good company when the camera is honest. He treats silence as a scene partner, not a pause. After a phrase lands, he leaves room for a refrigerator motor, a vent, a distant car. Those noises are true. Truth steadies fear better than any swell. When the theme returns, it arrives like a knock you were expecting, and still check anyway. She writes a high phrase no longer than a breath. It flutters near the edge of hearing, like a moth testing a porch bulb. It never settles. The ear reaches for it, and that reaching keeps the eye searching the frame. Suggestion moves viewers farther than certainty ever did. He records footsteps like consonants, rubber on linoleum, leather on wood, gravel on sidewalk seams. Each has a shape the ear recognizes without thinking. He places those shapes where a cut would be. The mind edits on sound first, then on picture. That order keeps panic readable. She lets telephones act like bridges. A ring becomes a line thrown over dark water. Voices cross, thin and brave, and the line shivers when hands shake. She holds a beat on the dial tone after the call ends. The empty tone says what people won't. Distance lives there. He avoids stings that jump the cue. No sudden blasts to fake a reaction. If surprise is earned, a single cupboard click will do more than a cymbal ever could. He trusts hinges, latches, and the timing of a light turning off one fraction too slow. Craft replaces noise. She mixes rooms to their size. Kitchens stay close and warm. Hospitals breathe cold and even. Yards open and carry insects like soft static. She lets the mask borrow the local sound so it can hide inside it. When it steps out, the difference is small and enough. He ages the motif across decades by lowering it half a step and thinning the keys. The tune remembers without bragging. Memory should feel worn at the edges, not cracked. When younger faces hear it, they tilt their heads the same way older faces did. That tilt is the handshake. She times silence to footsteps the way you time breath to stairs. Up 3, hold 2, down 4, hold 1. The body learns the count and calms even as the mind worries. In a long night, counting is kindness. Music that counts is kinder still. He ends the cue by taking himself out. 2 notes, then nothing. The house finishes the measure. Vent, clock, a pipe tick in the wall. Relief slips in where sound used to be. He lets it stay. Sleep needs quiet more than victory. and quiet wins if you let it. He lifts a store-bought face from a dusty peg and sets it under a lamp. Cheap vinyl turns thoughtful in sidelight. He trims the eye wells a breath wider and wipes the shine with a thumb. Ordinary becomes omen so slowly you can miss the exact second it changes. She brushes a thin coat of off-white that isn't quite clean. Too bright reads as joke, too dark reads as mannequin. This middle tone lets the room finish the colour. She keeps hair messy on purpose. Neat hair tells stories the mask shouldn't. He pairs it with coveralls that never quite fit. The fabric sags at the knees, pulls at the shoulders, hides the body's brag. A belt would editorialize. Pockets keep their opinions to themselves and hold nothing you'd want named out loud. She tests light angles the way a clerk tests batteries. Overhead makes a plate. Three-quarter makes a question. Backlight makes a hole. She chooses the question. Faces that ask more than they answer stay longer in a viewer's head. He treats the knife like a kitchen refugee. No gleam, no chorus, just a tool displaced from the drawer where it belongs. He carries it the way a person carries a flashlight, because the room might fail to explain itself. The camera doesn't applaud. She dresses rooms with items that earn their space, a key bowl, a mail stack, a chipped mug. Props that have chores invite belief. When the mask drifts through honest clutter, the mind accepts the guest before it recognizes the wrong. He likes phones with cords because the coil remembers hands. A receiver settling into its cradle is a lullaby you can mic. Cell screens are fine, but they don't click when you're done. Clicking tells a room what hour it is. She ages edges with respect. One scuff where a boot always kisses the jam, a dull line on a drawer pull, a grease thumbprint on a switch plate. Big scratches brag, small ones confess. Confessions are better company in October. He labels storage like a quiet archaeologist. Mask A, sidelight. Mask B, daylight okay. Coveralls, longer sleeve. Future crews will read these as weather maps. He hopes they'll keep the forecast mild and true. She avoids logos the way you avoid spoilers. Every brand narrows a story. Unnamed objects serve any town. The mask stays a blank noun so the verb can be the walk and the adjective can be the air. He lays everything back in a shallow box, face, cloth, utility bits, and closes the lid without drama. Tools nap well when the room is tidy. Tomorrow, a porch bulb will do most of the work. The rest is breath and distance. He remembers the wobble of a VCR settling into tracking, the picture breathing at the edges like a curtain in a weak draft. Blacks lift to dark grey. The theme bends a little at the corners. Friends sit cross-legged on carpet and pass a bowl across the line noise. Fear arrives softened, like a story told through a wall. The blur forgives, and forgiveness makes the night feel closer. She watches a DVD sharpen faces until paws become tiny maps. Pumpkins go brighter than memory, shadows thin at the edges. The film survives the polish because the frames were honest to begin with. She learns which players crush blacks and which leave room for air. Air matters more than perfection when a mask needs someplace to hide. He blesses a careful Blu-ray that keeps grain like fine dust on a windowsill. Wood looks like wood again. The mask stops glowing and starts absorbing. He hears the theme sit deeper in the room, less tin, more chest. Surround speakers turn yards into places you can step into. Mono keeps kitchens small and true. Both are right if humility leads. She reviews a restoration pass and asks for shadows back where someone overreached with a slider. Night should not look like ink, it should look like breath. She lets streetlights bloom a little and refuses teal where October never lived. A porch bulb stays warm, a sky stays honest. Palette is policy, is... He smiles at TV cuts that stitched in odd scenes to fill time slots. The seams show like hand mending on a favorite shirt. Bedrooms met the story at 10 p.m., with homework still on the desk. He respects the compromise, safety scissors around sharp corners, new lines that don't quite rhyme. Viewers kept what mattered anyway, the walk, the door, the pause. She listens to commentary tracks where memories misremember and then correct each other kindly. Laughter redraws arguments into footnotes. A dolly grip recalls which sidewalk had the best squeak. A composer hums a missing bar. The past turns companionable when the people who made it talk like neighbors over coffee. He loves boutique boxes that tuck in lobby cards, folded posters, and a booklet with a map of Haddonfield drawn like a bus route. Extras feel like a friend opening a drawer of saved paper. He leaves fingerprints on the map pages and decides that's the right way to read them. Stories want handling. She warns against over-scrubbed 4K that polishes faces until they look like plastic fruit. Texture is truth. Truth casts better shadows. When the transfer respects film stock, window glass shows its tiny waves and the mask carries the room's weather. You can almost smell the dust in a beam of light. Almost is enough. He catalogues aspect ratios and chooses tall doors over extra couch on the sides. Sightlines decide emotion long before actors do. A level horizon keeps panic honest. A cropped frame steals a step you needed to feel. He measures with his hand held out like a carpenter and nods when the rectangle fits the house. She tests streams on a phone balanced against a mug, on a TV with aggressive motion smoothing, on a projector that hums like a sleepy bee. She turns the smoothing off, dims the room, and lets the image breathe. Even compressed, the grammar holds. Human height, patient edges, sound that counts instead of shouts. The porch light travels well. He files the formats like migration records, tape, disc, pixels, and writes one line at the bottom. The story keeps its pulse if you don't touch the bulb. He presses stop and listens to the room finish the measure on its own. Vent, clock, a pipe tick in the wall. Every medium fades, the walk remains. He sketches a block from memory, Elm Crossing Russell, a school set back from the road, a hardware store with a bell that always rings too late. Hydrants squat where they should. Mailboxes lean a little toward the street like they're listening. The pencil draws straight because the town expects straight. She assigns sounds to corners. The crosswalk beeper clicks a stubborn rhythm. A dog checks the fence line at dusk and files a report in barks. Friday brings a faraway whistle from the game. Even with windows closed, houses hear each other. Sound is how small places stay stitched. He times the walk from hedge to porch, 11 steps if you don't hurry, 9 if you do. Porch to latch, 2. Latch to lamp pull, 1 and a reach. He writes the numbers on the map's margin. Panic scrambles math. Practice returns it. The film will hand the math back when needed. She marks shortcuts everyone denies. An alley behind the pharmacy, a path that trims the field, a gap in the hedge large enough for a brave kid and a bad idea. Stories travel these routes even when adults pretend they don't. The map blushes where truth shows through. He chooses houses with windows over sinks. People think best with wet hands. Phones used to hang near there. Habits stayed after the cords left. A low window lets a watcher see the street without being rude. Kitchens become headquarters because they already were. She keeps porches close to sidewalks so greetings happen without plans. A raised hand across 4 paces saves a text. Courtesy sharpens dread. When a place is this friendly, a figure that doesn't wave feels wrong from a block away. The wrongness reaches the camera before the figure does. He draws the bad corner, the blind bend by the brown house where bushes overgrew the sightline. Tires whisper there even at noon. Every town has one. He lets the mask borrow it for 30 seconds. and then walk on. The corner returns to being a corner. That's the scariest part. She logs streetlights with personalities. One hums, one flickers, one refuses to die, and bathes the curb in fatigued gold. Under that gold, the mask looks like a memory more than a person. She files that under use at 7:12 p.m. Windlight, leaves moving. He respects front yards that face each other too closely. Privacy is a rumor here. Curtains do more work than fences. 2 living rooms can watch the same cloud and disagree about its shape. When the shape is a person, disagreement becomes a plot. She adds tiny civic details that sell the fabric. A storm drain that eats a toy ball every spring, a telephone pole with staples from 100 lost cat flyers, a corner store that cashes checks and knows who should be walking where. Checks and knowing keep streets intact. He folds the map and says the quiet part aloud. Haddonfield is anywhere that trusts porches. That's why the walk works. The town is a mirror, and the mirror is kind until it isn't. He tucks the paper away and listens to a mailbox clack, shut down the block, right on time. He watches porches turn into small stages, a bowl, a bulb, a mat brushed straight with a foot. Logistics become love in this month. A working light says, "We're home," more clearly than any sign. He notes how the street slows itself on purpose, as if the neighborhood agreed to speak in whispers. She writes a pocket guide that hides inside the story. Know your doors, label your switches, keep a spare flashlight near the cutlery where hands already reach. Practical beats paranoid. Houses behave better when you treat them like friends. Greet them, tidy them, thank them with a click. He sees neighbors adopt watch together without naming it. A folding chair 2 houses down is policy. Eyes cross the street like gentle bridges. Someone in a hoodie becomes a hello, then a name, then a wave that lingers. Safety is often nothing more than attention shared. She notices the October economy humming under the leaves. Thrift costumes, bakery pies, volunteer patrols, thermoses at the corner shop. Fear pays its bills only when it's polite. She keeps the camera kind to workers, cashiers, crossing guards, the person who always fixes the blown bulb first. He blesses theatres that run the first film as community service. People sit with strangers and borrow steady breath. The credits move like a hymnal, soft, communal, slightly off-key in a way that makes the room warmer. He likes the shuffle and the coughs and the paper-wrapped candy. She invites late listeners to stitch a quilt in the comments. City, clock time, device. A night map grows pin by pin. Phnom Penh at 1:12 a.m., Dublin at 7:12 p.m., a quiet car in a driveway somewhere between. Quilts don't erase cold, they make it comfortable enough to fall asleep. He sets a soft rule for re-watch nights. Lamps up a notch, volume down a notch, phone face down but near. Comfort invites attention, attention invites sleep. The theme can whisper while the house does the rest. Vents, a clock, the pipe tick that only shows up in October. She reminds that locks are not confessions of fear, they're courtesy to houses. Doors thank you by sounding right when they close. Windows like a finger width of air to breathe. Curtains like to move just enough to prove the night is outside and you are not. He admires kids practicing the slow walk as a joke. Patience sneaks into them that way. Yards become classrooms where you learn how long a doorway lasts and how to measure a hallway with breath. The lesson travels into schools, into stores, into the kind of waiting that saves tempers. She ends the month with a pantry check, a broom set by the door, and a note for next year tucked in a cookbook. Which bulb hummed, which bowl was best, which neighbor waved first. Rituals remember for us when sleep takes the pen. She smiles and leaves the note crooked on purpose. He turns the porch light off and lets the night keep its own watch. Somewhere, 2 notes hum from a neighbor's speaker, then fade. The street exhales. Ordinary climbs back over the fence like a cat that knows the way. He listens to nothing for a long moment and calls it good. He thanks the late listeners for keeping the room quiet. The lamp stays low, the street stays ordinary. Before he files the notes, he asks for one small favor. Tell where they are and what time their screen shows. City first, then the clock. He'll pin a little night map from it later. He wonders what they watched on phone, TV, tablet, or a quiet car in the driveway. If they made it this far, he invites a gentle tap on subscribe so the porch light finds them next time. If something in tonight's walk stood out, a favorite branch of the timeline, a clean shot, a line of music, they can leave one short line and he'll read it before sleep. He reminds them the door's on the right and the comments are kind here. If the video kept them company, a like helps other night people find the room. He sets the chair in, leaves the curtain 1 inch open, and promises another quiet story on the next evening. Good night, and don't forget to drop City plus local time for the map.